pleasure to welcome you to the continuation of your news and current affairs program, TMI, reaching you live from our Lagos Network studio on the ITV network. I am Joshua Okata. If you did recall, a few days back, precisely June 12th, the nation Nigeria was in a celebratory mood of what we call a 26 years uninterrupted democratic rule, especially looking at it from the angle of governance. But of course, some persons on the other divide tend to differ, especially in their opinions, saying that there's nothing actually to celebrate, given the fact that what we have seen thus far is nothing far from civilian rule, stating reasons that has to do with the freedom of expression which has been stifled or kinda in some way dissented, given the fact that the nation, as it were, is not somewhat friendly when it comes to when an individual expresses themselves or tends to identify with a certain group, or what we call the freedom of association, which to a great extent has been met with brutal force, especially given the fact that state security or state apparatus, as it were, has been used to a great extent to be able to silence or stiffen, dissenting voice. But of course, for the purpose of our discussion today, we'll be looking at how we as a nation can engender internal democracy, given the fact that we have come thus far when it refers to the issue of a democratic nation, what we call nascent democracy, as people call it. But of course, we'll be having a guest who will be, giving us his analysis or insightful thoughts as regards this. And I'm being joined this morning by my guest in the person of Ubong Thompson, who is a coordinator, Arise Agenda Awareness Advocacy. Good morning, Mr. Ubong, and thank you once again for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Mr. George.
Now, let's look at your view, first of all, as regards the journey thus far. A lot of people, if you listen to my introduction, tend to differ, given the fact that we have not really practiced the real essence of what a democratic nation should be viewed. What's your take as regards that?
Exactly. What we have witnessed so far in the last 26 or past years has been, an attempted democracy practice nationally, for the sake that we all yearn for democracy during the military era, and knowing fully well that, as Nigerians, we cannot continue or survive or sustain dictatorial, rulership. We all collectively go against the military regime that was successive, in Nigeria, and then at the tail end, with the effort of our past heroes who fought against the military regime of General Babangida, we now had the opportunity to return back to civilian rule. And I can say categorically, the essence of going back to civilian rule was to engender, democracy across board in the nation, and so that the people can have freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of choice, and freedom to exist, and the right to exist at the same time. But what we've had so far has been a departure from what we even fought against. So we are on the process. I wouldn't say we are there yet.
All right, some persons believe that it seems, democracy, as it were, is not something that fits us as a nation, because obviously they see it as something borrowed. So what form of governance do you think is best fitting, considering the fact that Nigeria, as it were, is a multi-ethnic, multicultural, and of course multi-religious nation?
Democracy has been practiced in most of the, government of various continents and countries, and it has become an acceptable, culture or way of life for so many countries. And Nigeria cannot be an exception. We have to embrace democracy, because that's the only system of governance that suits our existence. Having known the fact that we come from diverse, tribes, ethnic groups, cultural background, traditions, then the only way that can suit Nigerian state is to practice true democracy. But the problem we are having is that even with the various ethnic groups, tribes, and religion, these are supposed to be tools that should, give us, should strengthen us and give us the enablement, the boldness, and the confidence to practice and be united in, being fair, just, and and make sure that we engender, true practice of democracy across board. But this has been a tool. The tribes, various tribe, ethnic group, religion, and political affiliation has become subject to, dividing Nigerians, which is not supposed to be so. So it takes sincere and honest Nigerians to, take a stake at the polity and said, no, democracy must be enshrined truly and be practiced in our government, in our governance. So we need true leaders in this aspect.
So are you saying that, in the last 26 years, true democracy has actually not been practiced in the essence of it? And if not, where do you think party or political parties come into play, if, as it were, we have to go back into engendering internal democracy, which will bring about true democracy?
What we have at the nation, practice in terms of that is called democracy is a departure from what it has to be. Actually, you see, if you talk about the role of political parties are supposed to, be a platform where electorates, are being organized, and then where they share common goals, common objective, and the people having same ideology, and coming out with a credible candidate through that platform to vie for the various political offices in the country, and then win elections, and then also at the same time make sure that all the manifestos of such political parties are being, what will be given out to the electorate, will be given back to the electorate. But you find out today, many political parties, what they are after, just to grab power by all means, by all way they can, and then once that is done, they go back and sleep. And corruption has been one of the major challenges that we have, that has not been able to allow political parties to operate, successfully. And not until there's a strong constitutional provision and penalties on corruption. Because why should we have corrupt political leaders in political parties? Such has to be expunged so that internal democracy can take place at the political parties level across board. So if constitutional authorities and then party authorities can build institutions, build structures, build systems that make sure that whatsoever that has to do with immoral attitudes or corrupt attitudes at any level, such person cannot be accepted or admitted into political parties, such that if these kind of people are absent, then we will be able to know, okay, we have honest and sincere fellows that run political parties, and what you have at the political parties level is eventually what will surface at the national leadership.
All right. Now, before we begin to talk about the issues bedeviling our political parties across board, you find out that when it comes to the issue of grabbing power, is there any way to curtail that? Because come to look at it, even within the party, there are laws that engender the issue of a candidate cross-carpeting or crisscrossing, as the case may be, against the backdrop that if there are internal wranglings that goes unsettled, it might lead to some sort of litigation even after the elections are over. But in some cases, there are individuals who, by way of appointment, they belong to a particular party A. Then by way of party affiliation, perhaps having or carrying a card belonging to party B, at night they belong to that party. So that kind of crop of politicians that we have, how can they be able to engender what we call internal democracy when there is no party affiliation, there is no party ideology, there is no party supremacy?
I think what has to be looked into is this constitutional provision that enables every Nigerians to have freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of speech, and freedom of to exercise their rights. This is what most politicians hide under and move and act disorderly across board.
So how do we curtail that abuse, in as much as the law gives them that room to have what we call freedom of association, just as you said? Because under freedom of association, some persons could use that as a guise to be able to go after stomach infrastructure as regards what they tend to offer given that platform of the party.
Is to enact an electoral laws that will limit such individuals from exercising such unsatisfactory attitude in their political parties. And political parties also need to look inward and see how to make sure that they build a system, a structure, and institutions that can resolve conflicts. Conflict in political parties should not exist under 24 hours. Such conflict should be resolved, because we understand, due to the fact that elements or people coming from different backgrounds, there must be misunderstanding among members of such political party. But the political party mechanism has to be such that effective conflict resolution mechanism must be put in place to resolve issues at the slightest opportunity, because issues of this nature is what prompts members of different or a particular political parties to act disorderly, or when conflict are not being resolved to the satisfaction of factional parties, you see disorderliness in such parties.
Okay.
So as a result of that, electoral act that will spell out maximum period of time that conflict can be resolved in political parties has to be enshrined.
All right. So looking at conflict resolution mechanism, which is not far-fetched from conflict, which is not far-fetched from the discussion we're looking at. If you are to look at the factors really that helps to engender internal democracy, as it were, we're going to be talking about transparency, accountability, and of course inclusiveness across party structures. Now, what is your take as regards the issue of encouraging the process by which candidates are selected for political offices, especially when it is free and devoid of the, in quote, Baba Sokwe kind of politics, or as it were, the godfatherism politics that we play in this country?
I do mention that processes matters a lot. Certain approach gives credibility to every outcome of any political system or political joining that any political parties wants to embark on. The process must be very transparent. The process must be acceptable by all. The process must be seen to have been what Nigerians or political parties have to adhere to and be loyal to the process, because every process that brings credibility gives enough confidence to electorate that once we get the process right, then the outcome definitely will be right. And you cannot undermine the process that, just like you had the former president of Nigeria of blessed memory, Musa Yaradua, that after an election had been concluded, he was, kind enough to tell Nigerians, I know too well the process that brought me into power was not good enough. It needs I talk about sincerity of Nigerians politicians, honesty of Nigerian politicians, the attitude to be fair, just, and say the truth
Now,
the way it is.
Now, the
is
issue
what can help, salvage the situation.
All right, the issue about consensus candidates is kind of becoming a new norm, which is gradually replacing the open ballot system or the open contestation system, where an individual comes out or emerges as a winner of that election by way of lawful vote. So what's your take as regards consensus candidates?
Well, consensus candidates can only, find its place in an elitist kind of political movement or parties where financiers or top leaders in such political parties comes together and reach, a conclusion that, okay, we are going to have so Mr. A or B, to mount to become an aspirant under, their political parties. It's very wrong. Though consensus, if done in all, I talk about sincerity, might not be, because if it is the best candidate that is being given, the concession to lead or to aspire to become an aspirant in a political party, that wouldn't form any, basis for, the argument. But you find out that the wrong candidates are always the one that emerges, during consensus arrangement, because probably he had the money, he had the contact, he had the connection, he had the power, and he has the strength. And you say the most credible, candidate will step back because they cannot tussle with the powers that be in political parties. And we have to sound this, as an encouragement to our youth and those that, are credible in their process, credible in their activities, that are very transparent Nigerians, to not to wither, but to come on board political platforms and form like minds, because by the time like minds comes together and they have a common agenda to practice, transparently political process, then before the long run, you see the transparent mind taking over political parties and enshrining rules of law in political parties. But aside saying that, you also find a situation where, things are done in political parties based on selection. You see credible candidate coming up to aspire, you just got to, be reminded that it's not your turn, or you cannot, you cannot fly the party flag at any, election. So you'll be so discouraged, and this has been happening across political divides.
Okay, now you talked about the issue of corruption, which is part of the challenges that have been, bedeviling the idea or movement towards engendering internal, political movement. Now, what is your take as regards other factors that could hinder that process from engendering internal democracy?
I think aside the corruption we've talked about, we also need to understand that, political parties need to carry out some awareness and enlightenment, campaign, at the electorate level. Many electorates do not know the manifestos, the ideologies of political parties. So they don't know how to come in and participate in political exercises. And that is why you have most time political apathy. You also have issue of conflict. You see during political meetings or political gatherings, you see, violence being perpetrated by, some individuals or some groups that want to scare away the courageous electorate. So you have several other vices. In Nigerian context, politics, I used to say, is deep, and political parties, what they practice is not what they actually preach. What they practice is not actually what they practice is not actually what they preach. They said one thing, and in the other hand, they are doing different thing.
Okay. Now, if you remember recently, a certain politician who was once a governor of Kaduna State once stated his reason for leaving the APC, given the fact that the party that he was associated with at some point in time, has derailed or deviated from the political ideals that in the first place brought them together as political, party candidates. Now, given the fact that you've said earlier that advocacy needs to be put in place, sensitization needs to be put in place for members who wants to join a particular party to understand what the party ideologies or ideals are. At what point do you think some members who are holding political office decide to derail from the party's ideology? What should be done at that point in time?
The issue of selfish interest and personal interest in politics has to be critically looked into. And that's the main reason why the Constitution and the Electoral Act should be promulgated in such a way that political office benefits should be unattractive.
Unattractive?
Unattractive for greedy persons.
So how would individuals who are young, without having the wherewithal in terms of the finance, run their elections if we don't have money bags, as it were, around them to sponsor their elections?
That is why you see, by the time money bags spend a whole lot of money in political, campaigns, political organizations, they will want to, gather the money back to themselves, and that will stall development in the country. So Nigeria needs internal democracy and also make that portfolio or electorate positions less materialistic.
How? What practical
in
steps
such a way that, for instance, you can't compare what the senators are taking home as of today compared to the ordinary Nigerians that are in the street, ravaged by hunger and whatsoever you can think of. Poor living conditions, poor education facilities, poor medical, facilities, and even some do not even have hope of tomorrow. This should be the main objective of political parties, to make sure problems of citizens have been solved. And this should be the political ideology. But you find out a situation where, because of personal interest, and probably if allocation of portfolio has not reached a particular politician in a political party, you see them having a departure, a disengagement from such political group. And this is killing the internal democracy we are talking about.
Okay, so it's usually a tall order, especially when you have to recall a certain elected, candidate. Now, when that candidate deviates or kind of disassociate himself from the party's ideal, if, for instance, the party's ideal is alleviating poverty and making sure that governance gets to the grassroots, And this individual is always, so mindful about his re-election as regards even meeting the needs of the electorate who even brought him into office in the first place. Should there be some sort of recall or disciplinary measures that could be meted out on such individuals so that those who might be contemplating following that footstep would have a rethink?
I think everything centers around the, electoral laws. Because when you campaign under a particular political, organization and a match winner, and with the agreement of all the electorate that voted you into, political positions, the social contract you have with the electorate is to implement the manifesto.
And when it doesn't,
which you show to the people, and in the absence of that, you have to relinquish your position, because
it's a tall order.
It is what you can't practice anymore.
But you and I know it's very impossible.
That is why I said it has to be backed up by the electoral laws. The Constitution has to spell it out that you cannot hijack, leadership portfolio under a particular political parties, and along the way you decamp or defect into another political parties, leaving the electorate behind in confusion, in a state of confusion.
All right, so as we custom on our conversation, you just have less than 1 minute. What would you say as regards the government of Akwa Ibom State, who under the platform that he was given deviated and now moving along with his candidate to the next party, given the fact that governance in itself will suffer in the hands of the people who actually elected him into office? What's your take as regards that in the next 1 minute?
I always said the aspect and my perspective in the event of the governor of Akwa Ibom State is a different case entirely, because this has been a man that came into government and has performed satisfactorily in the last 2 years plus. And his political movement, as I said, is quite different from where you see others, defecting as a result of, financial corruption or underperformance. So if by the mere reason that there's a fraction in the political center which house is political parties, and as the Constitution and the electoral law permits that once there is division in a particular party, it behoves on the mantle of the political office holder to move as a result of.
All right, so we are really
this.
pressed for time. So thank you so much, Ubong Thompson, coordinator Arise Agenda Awareness, for giving us your 2 cents, as it were, on the matter of engendering internal democracy in Nigeria. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, that's our offering for you from our Lagos Network studios. Many thanks for watching.